Ryomen Sukuna is perhaps the strongest sorcerer in history, and during his heyday 1,000 years ago, he went from just a human sorcerer to the king of curses. He went from a mere mortal to a cursed god. How did he do it? What are his world-breaking powers and abilities? And what is his true master plan right now in the modern world? There's a reason why Sukuna's soul was split into 20 cursed objects, and there's a reason why Sukuna reappeared right now in the modern era. By the end of this video, you will learn everything you need to know about Sukuna's dark origins, his unbelievable demonic powers, and his true intentions for the modern world. You guys know how this works. If you enjoy our Jujutsu Kaisen content and you want us to keep it coming, leave a quick like and comment right now to help us out with that YouTube algorithm. And if you watch my videos but you haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, we are trying to hit 2 million subscribers right now, so every subscription counts and it helps us out a lot. Okay, so Sukuna originally lived during the Heian period of Japanese history, which took place about 1,000 years ago. This is a real historical period in our own world, but in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, this period is known as the Golden Age of Sorcery. That is because cursed energy was most abundant during this period, meaning that there were a lot of extremely powerful sorcerers and extremely powerful curses that were running around at that time. Fun fact, but in Demon Slayer, both the demons and the demon slayers trace their origins to the Heian era as well. Clearly, this period of history, which took place between 794 and 1185 AD, is associated with mythical and magical powers. And this makes sense, as the Heian period was seen as a golden age of Japanese culture, a period in which Japan began asserting its own independent identity after years of being strongly influenced by the older, larger, and more powerful Chinese civilization. Now, some believe that Sukuna is even older than the Heian period, because during the Heian era, he was already considered a demon. Dubbed the King of Curses, Sukuna's true form at that time was described as having 4 arms and 2 faces. Clearly, he was no longer just human at this point, so he may have actually been born much earlier. That said, we do know that during the Heian period, Sukuna murdered many powerful Jujutsu sorcerers, and no matter how many sorcerers tried to defeat him, they all failed. Sukuna became so notorious that people began believing that he was actually a demon all along, and that he might have always been a powerful cursed spirit who was created by the human fear of demons. However, in chapter 3 of the manga, Gojo confirms that Sukuna was in fact a human once, and we know that he still possesses memories of when he was human. During the Heian period, Sukuna apparently managed to single-handedly destroy the strongest sorcerer groups at that time, including the Sun Moon Stars and the 5 Empty Generals. These were the most elite sorcerers of the Fujiwara clan, which was the most powerful clan in Japan at that time. The Fujiwara clan did also exist in our own world, and they were said to be essentially the true political and military power in Japan at that time. Technically, the ruler was the emperor and the imperial family, but the Fujiwara clan was the true power base, and they regularly intermarried with the imperial family in order to secure their position on top. I guess this situation is similar to the Tokugawa shogunate of the Edo period, where again the emperor was technically the ruler, but the real power rested with the shogun. Long story short, back then Sukuna was an absolute menace who struck fear into even the most powerful sorcerer families in Japan. And although he was once a human sorcerer, he eventually became the evil king of curses, known as the Disgraced One. But why did Sukuna become evil? And how did he attain an inhuman form despite starting out as human? We obviously don't have every detail of Sukuna's life story, but from what we know about him, it's safe to assume that he is motivated by an unrelenting quest for power and to become the strongest. As early as chapter 3, Sukuna says that any hierarchy which is not based purely on strength is boring. And in every big battle that he takes part in, Sukuna shows that he loves the thrill of the fight. He also tends to compare humans to insects and maggots due to the fact that they are so weak. And it is clear that he doesn't value human life and the human will to live. For Sukuna, strength and power are everything, so someone who is weak like a human is seen as completely worthless in his eyes. Since we know that Sukuna also started out as human, I wonder what happened in his life to make him have so much loathing for his own species, or I guess his own former species. There may be some form of projection going on here. Perhaps something tragic happened to Sukuna when he was human, and because back then he was weak, he was powerless to stop it. So he decided to renounce his own humanity in order to become stronger. And the human insects that he sees crawling around remind him of how weak he used to be, and that is why he hates them so much. But whatever happened to make Sukuna renounce his humanity and begin hating humans, he clearly underwent a real transformation. Because despite starting off as a normal human, he somehow became a demon-like monster with 4 arms instead of 2, and 4 eyes instead of 2. It's one thing for a human Jujutsu sorcerer to turn evil and become a curse user, like for example Suguru Geto, but it's quite another for a human to have his body literally transform physically until he resembles a terrifying demon. Was this the result of some sort of rare curse technique like Mahito's idol transfiguration, which allows him to reshape souls and bodies along with them? Or was it the result of Sukuna becoming so strong that he evolved beyond humanity, kind of like Master Tengen? Or was it maybe some sort of special flesh transformation technique? I'll talk more about this later on in the video, including my own theory about Sukuna's true final form. But in the meantime, let me know how you think Sukuna came to have 4 arms and 4 eyes instead of 2 down in the comments. There are some potential clues about Sukuna's true origins in real-life Japanese history and folklore, although it's mostly some pretty obscure stuff that is not well known outside of Japan. To be honest, it's hard to even find decent English language translations of most of this history and mythology, but I was able to dig up some stuff anyway. In the real world, a mythological creature known as Sukuna is first mentioned in 720 AD, during the Nara period of Japanese history. The Nara period came just before the Heian period, and during this time an important text known as the Nihon Shoki was published. A book whose title can be translated as The Chronicles of Japan. It is said to be the second oldest recorded text in Japanese history, and basically it is a detailed record of Japanese history up to that point. The Sukuna who is mentioned in this text has 4 arms and 4 eyes, just like the Sukuna in Jujutsu Kaisen, although this Sukuna also has 4 legs. He is said to be extremely tall, over 3 meters, and he is said to have superhuman combat abilities. In the Nihon Shoki, Sukuna is portrayed as an evil mass murderer who refused to submit to the emperor's rule. He is blamed for killing tens of thousands of people in his violent opposition to the emperor, and he was only defeated after the emperor sent his shogun Takefurukuma no Mikoto to kill him. So he is basically a demonic superhuman warrior who killed thousands and rebelled against the emperor. He is a symbol of evil, violence, and chaos. But here's the interesting part. This is not the only type of portrayal of Sukuna in Japanese folklore. According to the Nihon Shoki, Sukuna was from Hida province, and that is where he staged his evil rebellion. But some locals in what was once Hida province actually venerate and worship Sukuna as a benevolent guardian to this day. Far from being a demonic murderer, he was credited with introducing Buddhism to the province, and he was said to protect the people from monsters such as evil dragons. Some have even referred to him as an incarnation of the Bodhisattva canon, and if you know anything about Japanese Buddhism, then you know that this is some of the highest praise possible. So, how can this happen? How can Ryomen Sukuna be a murderous demon according to some, and a benevolent protector and spiritual guardian according to others? One theory is that the real-life Sukuna was one of Hida province's local rulers who pushed for independence and tried to resist the rule of the emperor. Because the Nihon Shoki was put together by the imperial family, Sukuna was portrayed as a demonic villain because he dared to stand up against the emperor's divine right to rule. But to the locals of Hida, he was seen as someone who tried to protect their family's property and independence from an invading army that sought to subjugate them. So to them, Sukuna was actually a hero. Since the imperial forces won in the end, their portrayal of Sukuna as evil is what stuck. history is written by the victors. And that is what we find in most modern depictions of Sukuna in media. But as I said, some locals in what was once Ida province still see Sukuna as a hero and benevolent guardian, which is why they worship and venerate him. This is extremely interesting, and to me, this begs the question. Since we know that there are two sides, i.e. two faces to the real-life Sukuna, could something similar also be happening in Jujutsu Kaisen? Is Sukuna really just a sadistic monster who sees all humans as worthless insects? Or could there be more to his story? Could it be that back when he was human, he was actually a hero who tried to protect others, and then a tragic series of events led him to transform into a human-hating monster? What if Sukuna was a local ruler who tried to protect his family and his people from the invading imperial forces? But then he lost the war, and everyone he loved was murdered by the emperor. Sukuna himself managed to survive, perhaps due to the immense cursed energy that the suffering and death of his loved ones produced. But he was no longer the same man he was before. With everyone he cared about now dead, he came to hate the rest of humanity, and he vowed to get revenge on all of them. He swore to never let himself be weak and helpless again. Instead, he decided to become the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer in history. Now that would make for an emotional and compelling backstory. So I really hope that something like this does really get revealed in the end. It would add so much depth to Sukuna's character. But speaking of Sukuna's secret past, let's talk about his wife. Well, to be clear, there is no evidence that Sukuna actually had a wife and family even back when he was human, but a powerful sorceress from the Heian period does claim to be his wife. I am of course talking about Yorozu, a brash and overconfident ancient sorceress who was obsessed with Sukuna and wanted to become his wife. Known for being wild and unsophisticated, Yorozu preferred to not wear any clothes. Yes, you heard that right. And she completely rejected all customs and formalities. She fell in love with Sukuna at first sight, and she decided that she wanted to end his loneliness with her love. Now, even though Yorozu isn't exactly the most sane and rational waifu, I mean, let's be honest, she's clearly a yandere, it is still interesting that upon seeing Sukuna in person, her first impression of him was that he was lonely. This may not mean anything, or it could be a very small hint that there is more to Sukuna and his past than just being an evil sorcerer and the king of curses. Maybe he really was different once, long ago, and that is why he seems so lonely now that he's forsaken his humanity. Another powerful sorcerer that Sukuna has a direct connection to is the most important villain in the entire story so far, and the chief architect of everything that's been happening in Jujutsu Kaisen up to this point, Kenjaku. Kenjaku was the one who turned Sukuna's fingers into cursed objects, allowing Sukuna to survive from the Heian period all the way up to today. Presumably, Sukuna willingly made a contract with Kenjaku in order to make this happen, and that is why Sukuna's vessel Yuji was automatically entered into the culling game once the culling game began. We don't know the exact details of how this contract came to be, but since we know that Sukuna was a more powerful sorcerer than Kenjaku, it is likely that Kenjaku turned Sukuna's fingers into cursed objects because that is exactly what Sukuna wanted him to do. The big question is why? Did Sukuna just want to ensure that he will live forever by turning his fingers into cursed objects and then using those cursed objects to possess new vessels for all of eternity? Or was there some specific reason why Sukuna wanted to live long enough to be present in this particular period of history? Is there something in the modern world that Sukuna is especially interested in? We all know that Kenjaku has a crazy master plan for all of Japan and frankly the entire world, but what exactly is Sukuna planning? The King of Curses isn't the type of guy who would just blindly follow the whims of Kenjaku. So what is he really after? That is the million-dollar question. And in order to understand Sukuna's true intentions, we have to take a closer look at all of his unique powers and abilities. Sukuna possesses superhuman strength, speed, agility, and endurance, and even without cursed techniques, he is a master of hand-to-hand combat. He is also extremely intelligent and tactically brilliant, allowing him to be extremely effective in any battle. His intellect allows him to attain full mastery of his cursed techniques and reverse cursed energy, making him a practically insurmountable force. He is especially dangerous because he possesses unbelievably vast levels of cursed energy. And in fact, Sukuna may have more cursed energy than any other being in history. We know for a fact that Sukuna has a lot more cursed energy at his disposal than even Satoru Gojo. But Gojo is able to use the cursed energy that he does have extremely efficiently due to the 6 eyes, which is what allows Gojo to hold his own against Sukuna without running out of cursed energy. Even other cursed energy behemoths like Yuta are simply no match for Sukuna when it comes to sheer quantity of cursed energy. Yuta believes that Sukuna may have at least double the amount of cursed energy that he does, if not more. On top of having insane amounts of cursed energy, Sukuna is also highly effective at controlling his cursed energy, which can often be just as important as having a lot of it. If you don't have excellent control of your cursed energy, even if you have a lot of it, it will leak out inefficiently and it will be wasted very quickly. Being able to control and manipulate your cursed energy in an effective and efficient way is extremely important. According to Hajime Kashimo, if Gojo didn't have the 6 eyes, Sukuna would be even more effective in controlling his cursed energy than Gojo. Luckily for Gojo, the extremely rare technique known as the 6 eyes allows him to stand toe-to-toe with Sukuna. Now, we don't know for sure what Sukuna's original curse technique is, because he demonstrates the ability to use 2 distinct types of attacks. The first is the ability to launch invisible cuts and slashes at his opponents, and the second is the ability to launch fire-based attacks at his opponents, such as fire arrows. As mentioned earlier, Sukuna is also able to use reverse curse technique, which allows him to heal his injuries extremely quickly, including very serious injuries like lost limbs. Sukuna also possesses the extremely rare ability to heal the bodies of others using his reverse curse technique. And he can even use it to heal his own burnt out curse technique, which is another incredibly rare ability. Sukuna is able to use domain amplification, which is an anti-domain technique that allows Sukuna to envelop himself in his own domain in order to resist the curse technique and domain expansion of his opponent. And speaking of domain expansion, Sukuna's domain is called Malevolent Shrine, and it is one of the absolutely strongest domains in the history of Jujutsu Kaisen. When Sukuna expands his domain, a dark and creepy Buddhist shrine appears behind him. The shrine is surrounded by water, and its foundation seems to be made on top of a whole bunch of animal skulls that may belong to bulls. The shrine also has a bunch of giant horns that might also be bull horns growing out of the roof. The entrances to the shrine on each of the 4 sides look like giant mouths with teeth. Overall, I have to say that Malevolent Shrine is probably the coolest domain expansion visually. It is equal parts epic and creepy, and the color scheme of the blue water beneath and the red clouds above is just next level. I would absolutely wear a Malevolent Shrine t-shirt if I ever got the chance. Anyway, this domain's guaranteed hit attack is a ruthless and continuous slashing attack that will tear apart everything inside the domain except for Sukuna himself. There are 2 types of slashing attacks, Cleave and Dismantle, and the attacks will continue until Sukuna is weakened to the point that he can no longer maintain his own domain. Cleave is Sukuna's attack of choice for enemies who possess cursed energy, while Dismantle is used to destroy inanimate objects. Due to its ability to unleash a barrage of endless slashing attacks, Malevolent Shrine is essentially a weapon of mass destruction. It can kill hundreds of civilians and destroy an endless number of objects within a 200-meter radius almost instantly. Sukuna is able to control the range of his domain within certain parameters, and he is able to expand his domain without actually closing the barrier. He uses a binding vow to create an escape route from his domain in exchange for the ability to expand the effective range of his guaranteed hits. Since Malevolent Shrine doesn't have an outer barrier, you cannot destroy the domain just by destroying the barrier. The only way to destroy the domain is to injure Sukuna so severely that he can no longer maintain it. And as you can imagine, having to inflict such serious injuries on the strongest sorcerer in history is no easy task. In addition, Sukuna is able to actually change the conditions of his domain using a binding vow. And this allows him to do things like remove the domain's guaranteed hit effect in order to increase the domain's overall power. Along with Unlimited Void, Malevolent Shrine is the most sophisticated domain expansion in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, and any clash between these 2 domains really is a battle of the gods. I don't want to spoil too much of the story for those of you who are not caught up to the manga, but we do get to see both Sukuna and Malevolent Shrine in action a lot more as the story progresses. And it's safe to say that Sukuna's full power is absolutely terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Finally, let's talk about Sukuna's ability to transform his flesh, because this little power might end up being a lot more important than we realize. We first see this ability manifesting once Yuji consumes Sukuna's fingers and becomes his vessel. Even though Yuji is able to maintain control of his body for the most part, and he successfully prevents Sukuna from taking over, Sukuna is still able to manifest a mouth and eyes on Yuji's body, and he can use them to see and speak. He is able to do this against the host's will, without having to actually take over the body from the host. This ability to transform his flesh could be an important clue about Sukuna's true form and why he looked so differently back during the Heian period. Assuming that he really was human once, Sukuna would have been born with 2 arms and 2 eyes. And yet in his true form or final form back at the height of his power, he had 4 arms, 4 eyes, and his face looked drastically different from that of a normal human face. It is possible that Sukuna used his ability to transform his flesh in order to attain this optimal final form which he became known for. And if that is the case, then we can expect Sukuna to try to attain this form again in the modern world. The fact that he still hasn't attained this form suggests that he is still not at full power, even though right now in the manga he is absolutely incredibly powerful, infinitely more powerful than he was at the beginning of the story. Perhaps when he finally consumes that 20th finger, Sukuna will regain his 4-armed form, and that is when he will finally be at his peak once again after 1,000 years. So is this Sukuna's ultimate master plan? To regain his full power and his true form in the modern world? And if so, why? Did he have Kenjaku turn him into a cursed object just because he wanted to live as long as possible and because he wanted to be reincarnated into some distant, more interesting time period? Or could there be some reason why Sukuna wanted to return during this specific period of time? Is the Sukuna of Jujutsu Kaisen just a one-dimensional evil sadist? Or could there be some nuance to his character, like with the real Sukuna, who is hated and feared by some, but honored and revered by others? Was Yorozu's observation that Sukuna seems lonely a clue that he did have a different life once, but it was taken away from him? Could Sukuna's reemergence in the modern world have something to do with the evolution of Master Tengen, who has continued to evolve beyond humanity for these past 1,000 years? We know that Kenjaku has a place for Tengen in his master plan, but could Sukuna also be interested in Tengen's evolution? If Sukuna really was a normal human once, and if he became a monster after something precious was taken away from him, such as perhaps his family, then maybe he believes that once Master Tengen becomes powerful enough, he will be able to use Tengen to correct the injustices that he suffered all those centuries ago. Maybe Sukuna believes that Tengen can bring back his family or some other precious thing that was taken away from him. As cool as it is to have a merciless and unapologetic villain like Sukuna, I do personally hope that there is more nuance to him and that it all goes back to his true backstory. I also hope that Sukuna has a secret master plan that goes beyond just being a tool for Kenjaku. And this secret master plan could change everything we thought we knew about Sukuna, Tengen, and the very nature of Jujutsu sorcery. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Does Sukuna have a tragic backstory that we still don't know about? And does he have a secret master plan that required him to return in this specific time period? If you're looking for an epic Jujutsu Kaisen video to watch next, don't ignore my video on how Sukuna's biggest rival, Satoru Gojo, became an absolute monster. Link in the description and on screen right now. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like to let me know. And if you're one of the over 50% of people who watch my videos but haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, do me a big favor and subscribe right now. We are trying to level this channel up to special grade by hitting 2 million subscribers, and every single subscription counts.